Go.
Hi, welcome to a sustainable living workshop in my veggie patch this morning. Ordinarily I'd be running it in the Dardanup Community Resource Centre, but we've set this up. Thank you very much to the Shire of Dardanup for running these, and for Isabel for organising all these kinds of things. This is a way for us to stay connected, which is pretty cool. I think that's one of those things that we need to remember to be a little bit more adaptive and solution oriented. So this is our way of bringing some ideas for gardening to you. On the iheartdardanup page, Isabel has put a link through with this website, with this workshop, and she's put a link through to some notes that I've done up for you. Have a look at the notes. They are not by any means a stretch of the imagination, absolutely everything about growing plants for free, but what they are some tips. Please, I've got my husband doing the videoing today, so please, if you've got any questions, normally I'd be at a workshop and it'll be very animated and everybody would ask me heaps of questions. So Fiona and Julie and Diane and everybody that would normally come along, if you've got questions, please pop them through, and hopefully Dave can ask them as we go along. What I wanted to do was talk about...
Notorious.
Hi Vic, how you going? What I wanted to do, I suppose, starting off...
Jackie Smith.
...was have a look at some of the things that make us frugal as gardeners. So when you're going shopping, there's quite a lot on the internet at the moment about growing scraps or growing things from scraps in your veggies. Quite honestly, some are worth doing and some aren't. There are some that are a little bit more kind of for novelty value, I guess. They are useful, but they don't give you a huge yield. So what I wanted to do was focus on the things that will give you the most bang for your buck and the easiest things to do in our garden. So I wanted to talk about utilising our scraps, looking at different cuttings, types of cuttings and how to take those, and then also looking at dividing your plants. So that's what I wanted to do today. With our scraps, when you go shopping, probably the easiest ones are celery, spring onions and sweet potatoes. So with those ones, the easiest of all, your bunch of spring onions. When you go shopping, you can stick it in your fridge, or what you can do is you can just shove it in the garden. Okay, if you've got a bunch that's got some roots on the bottom of it, plant it. Okay, you're totally fine to plant it. And then what you do is when you harvest them, this is in the ground, and then just come along and snip the tops off. Or you can do is when you're using your spring onion, cut the top off, leave a little bit on the bottom of it with some roots on it, and stick it in either the ground or some water, which is what I've done, and you'll notice that it's already starting to shoot. And that was the day before yesterday. Okay. Now, the other one are carrot tops. Now, really good novelty value if you've got some young children at home. You will not grow a carrot from the top of your carrot. All right, if you want to get the carrot that we normally eat down the bottom, the red one or the yellow one or the purple one or the orange one, you need to plant some seeds. But what it will do is if you cut it off and stick it in some water, mine's starting to shoot some little some roots on the side, and the green tops are going. You can eat the tops. So even if you buy your bunch of little baby carrots and you've got some green ferns on the top, utilise those. Great in salads. You can make a pesto out of them. So don't throw the tops away. They're useful. But if you want to grow them from the top of this one, that's all you're going to get is the green tops. So for me, they're really not all that much value, but if you've got young kids at home, it is a good thing to get them sprouting little heads. So with those, we've got spring onions. With your celery, often what we do when we get home we've got our really big bunch of celery, is we cut the base off. Cut it sort of about at least 5 centimetres, leave that base section on it and cut it off. And you can stick your stalks in some water or however you like to store yours. That base will grow again. So what you can do is put that in some water, and after a few days you'll find that that will sprout, and then you'll start to get some roots, and you can replant that. Now, we're quite used to buying celery as a big bunch, but in the garden it's a really good cut and come again. So it's a little bit like our lettuce that we just tear the leaves off. We can do the same thing with our celery. So what we do is we just cut one of the stalks off at a time. So when it's growing, it'll just grow for ages and ages. So you just keep cutting and pull it off. So that one is definitely worth replanting if you've got a nice bunch of celery. Now the other one's sweet potato. So there are a few. Sweet potatoes, sometimes if you're like me, we go through phases where we eat sweet potato and then we'll eat something else, and then you might get a little roguey one that's gone and it's started to shoot in the bottom of your cupboard. You're probably not like me and you've probably eaten them all and they don't do that. But if yours happens to shoot, what I do is I'll just pop it in about the bottom third, stick it into a glass of water. You can put some toothpicks or little corn cob holders, or I just happen to have these plastic novelty fish. I don't know where I found them from, but they were in the cupboard, so I used those. It just holds it into the water, and after a few days what you'll find is they'll start to sprout, and then you've got these lovely little shoots coming off. Once these shoots here, once they get to probably 10-15 centimeters, once the leaves are started to get a little bit more, what I'm going to do is I just gently tear it off, and I've made a cutting, or what we call a slip. So with that slip, what I'm going to do is I'll just pop it in that same bit of water. These make great houseplants in winter. Where I am, I can't grow sweet potato all year round. It tends to die because of the frost, but in Bunbury you'll be fine to grow it all year. So you can just keep these going. So these ones here, what I'm going to do is I'll get it going in the water, and then I'll pot them up and I'll keep them over winter, and then I'll plant them out in the spring. So that's how I do my sweet potatoes. So hopefully I've got some people out there.
17.
I've got a few. Yeah, so sweet potatoes. The other thing, when you're going shopping, you might be buying ginger this time of year. I like having ginger in my cups of tea and things like that, or curries. That's kind of that time of the year. Occasionally you'll find that they shoot. Now, if you want to plant it and it's only got little tiny eyes, what you can do is I normally would put it into a bowl of warm water overnight to just give it a bit more of an activation to get it going. And then I would put this in quite a large pot. So they're very hungry. If you think where they come from tropics, and they're going to be growing in the leaf litter it's got a lot of organic matter in it. So when you're potting it up, put it into a mixture that's got lots of organic matter. It's a very hungry plant. So I've got a couple of bonsai pots that my husband has, these lovely big bonsai pots. So what I usually do is I plant them in that, and then they need to go in and just cover the tuber here. Okay, just cover that, and then these will start to grow up and give you a lovely big green shoot. Now with the ginger, I find once I've planted it out, in that same year I can get another yield. So with this one here, what I could do is I could actually break that one, and I get several plants. I could probably take that little tiny one off as well, and then I'd have 3 plants. So initially when I first started growing ginger, I had a piece a bit like this, probably about 150 grams, and then at the end of the year I actually picked a kilo of ginger. So it's definitely worth growing your own, and you can do it even down here in the southwest. The other one is if you've got some turmeric, you can grow your turmeric. The only thing I find with your turmeric is it does take that bit longer because we aren't subtropical. So plan for a yield after that sort of second year or the third year. I've got some in a really large, the base of an olive drum, best pots out. You buy an olive drum, it's about 100 litres I think, cut it in half. It costs you about $30. That's if you've got a 50 litre pot for $15, that's pretty good. But I grow mine in that, put a few holes down the bottom, and then my turmeric stays there the whole time. So you can use the leaves and you can use the tubers, but it's so much nicer to have your own. If you're going...
And it said ginger beer.
Ginger beer, yeah. Yeah, yes. Dave hasn't made me any ginger beer. So most of you that know us know that we grow what we can, preserve what we can. Anything that stands still long enough, Dave will make into an alcoholic beverage. So generally the pears get turned into perry or cider. We make our own beer with our own hops. So ginger beer, definitely on the list. So I need to grow some more. Yeah, so, and we grow our own turmeric and things. So when you want to grow things, what you will find is if you don't buy organic or Australian, if it's imported, a lot of the time it will be sprayed with something, especially garlic. If it's come in, probably won't be coming from China at the moment, but if it's come in, a lot of the time they will actually spray it and it won't sprout. So if you're going to plant something that you want to eat, choose the best that you can. So if you can buy some organic ginger or turmeric, I know you can get it in at the plant and some of the other really nice stores in town in Bunbury, and Margs and Bustleton and anywhere else, but definitely worth giving it a go. With your garlic, this is the best time to plant them at the moment. I've got mine in already. I usually plant it on a root week if you're into moon planting.
Vic asked if turmeric will grow from the shops.
Yeah, it will, Vic. It will. Turmeric will grow from the shops. I would do the same thing and activate it. So put it in some warm water overnight. Try and get some organic stuff if you can. This isn't the most ideal time to plant it. Normally I find in the spring if you can, but if you've got something shooting, then give it a go. You haven't lost anything. But it will do. You know, once the Isabel gets the plant swap and things happening like that, hopefully towards, you know, probably closer to spring, I would imagine we'll get into that. Then maybe, you know, some of us who've got some turmeric and that sort of thing, we could bring it on.
Wave to your mum and Lynn.
Yeah. Hello, I've got Dave's giving me instructions. It feels a bit odd. I'm waving to everybody. Hello. My mum's on there, is she?
Yeah.
Hi, Mum. Hi, Lynn.
And Lynn.
Hi, Lynn. So, garlic, absolutely fabulous time to pop it in. I've been keeping mine for probably near on 15 years. When you plant it, so this is you know, it's really tempting to eat all the big bulbs, but you need to save some. Okay, so when you've got your garlic, I'll peel it off. This papery stuff is kind of important on your garlic. What you do is you've got yourself your garlic bulb, and it's got all of these different ones here. Now, if I was going to plant that as it is, it'll all sprout and it'll look a bit like garlic chives, and I won't get a lot of these bulbs. They'll stay really small. So what we do is we gently prise them off, and you'll find that you've got quite a lot. So this is what we plant when we plant our garlic. You can store-bought if it's Australian and it hasn't been sprayed. Try and get it from one of the organic shops if you can. But there are some really great people that grow garlic in the southwest. This is the bottom and this is the top. So when you put it in, when we plant things, we generally plant it twice the depth of what this is. So if you think about your thumb, my thumb's about that. So you can plant it with your thumb, or generally I get a stick. Okay, and I'll poke a little hole and pop it in there, pointy end up, and then literally this time of year, if you're doing it in a root week, it'll sprout within the week. You know, 3 to 5 days and they're up. But with this, I've got what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I get anywhere between 6 and 8 really good bulbs. In there, you're going to find, if you open them up, you're going to find that there are a few little tiny ones, right? These are the ones you eat. These are the ones you plant, okay? Because you're going to get bigger bulbs out of those from next year. So these little ones, they're great. Just pop them in to your salad dressings or in your food or whatever, okay? So they're the ones that you plant. So with those, the other things are pumpkins. This time of year, we're going to be eating lots of pumpkins. Save for seeds. You can plant the seeds. You can toast them and you can eat them. So think about, I guess, it's thinking about making less waste and utilising what you have. So utilise your scraps a little bit better. So grow some of the ones that you can. And then with the other ones like your pumpkins and things like that, think about saving some of the seed and popping it in for next year. Because at the moment there's a bit of a shortage on seeds. You mightn't know exactly what you're going to get because depending on pumpkins and where they've come from, they can cross-pollinate. But it is worth saving some seeds and giving it a go. So that's pretty much scraps. I would definitely go with things like with your celery, your spring onions. They're definitely worth planting. You can grow from things like lettuces and things like that. There's a million different sites at the moment putting on what scraps are worth it. But if you've got time and space, just go for the ones that are going to give you a proper yield. But yeah, that's not fun. Now, the other way that we can grow from either shop bought or in the house is by taking cuttings. Now, if you happen to be buying your herbs in a little, however you buy them, sometimes, you know, whether you get them at the farmer's market or whether you get them from the supermarket in a bag, you can grow those. So rather than paying $5 a little tiny bunch, grow yourself a plant. It's way cheaper and then you'll have it ongoing all the time. They're really, really easy to take as cuttings. So generally those sorts of cuttings, the easiest ones for us are semi-hardwood cuttings this time of year. So they're the ones that are a little bit more bendy. So if you've got your this is rosemary. If you've got your bunch of rosemary, you've got little bits of bendy bits on the end of it. This is probably a little bit more hardwood cutting, but for the exercise we're going with this. When you've got your cuttings, you can either, when you get them home, rather than sort of wrapping them up in a bit of newspaper and chucking them in the bottom of the crisper, take the ends off. So take off that a little bit down the bottom. I wouldn't actually like so.
Just had a question from Annette. What's the best way to eat kelp?
Kelp. I don't know.
Sushi.
Well, sushi, yeah. Look, I've seen some people make some really nice pickles. I know, I would Google. I'm not really good with kelp. I'm an inlander. I try very hard to stay away from the ocean. But yeah, that's one I would Google somewhere else.
Sushi sheet.
Yeah, Dave loves his sushi. So as a sushi sheet, as a nori roll, yep, that's what I'd go with. But yeah, sorry, can't help you. All right, you've gone to the shops and you've got a bunch of herbs. What I would do is when you get them home, strip off the ends. These are really good. You can dry them, so you can have some dried herbs as well. Stick your, don't have to take a lot. And then what you do is strip those all off and then just pop them in some water. Now, the benefit with that is that you don't have to take the bottom off. They just make the water a bit mucky, which is, I don't really like. But if you're going to use them straight away, it doesn't really matter. Grab them and stick them in your, just remove said sweet potato, pop them in your jar of water. It can be a little vase, it can be a little jar, it can be a glass, whatever you like, and you can have a nice little display of them on your windowsill. Stick them in there and utilise your herbs. After about 5 days, you will find that some of them will take root. So this includes things like your rosemary, sage, thyme, it's really easy, even your basil that you get at the supermarket. What you can do is pop that in there and you'll find it'll grab little roots and then you can plant it out. I wouldn't be going for it in the, here where I am, I wouldn't be planting it in my veggie patch. I would be potting it up and keeping it inside as a houseplant where it's nice and warm, because we generally start having frosts sort of the beginning of May. But when you're on the coast, you've got more of a subtropical, Mediterranean subtropical, you could probably grow it all year round. But definitely worth giving it a go. It'll keep them, you'll get less limp of these, and then you'll start growing them. So with the cuttings, that's the easiest way to do it, is grab your plant, use your secateurs. I always joke, you've got one in your handbag because you're wandering around and you see somebody and you'll cut it off, or, I used to die. My grandma used to do it. We'd be going for a walk, and I remember being a little tiny girl walking along, holding her hand, going to the bus stop, and there'd be this gorgeous geranium, and it would be like flowing over the wall, and you'd be like, oh, that's very nice. Oh dear, it broke off and pops it in her handbag, you know. And I thought, oh, embarrassing. Now I'm one of those people who goes, oh, look at that gorgeous geranium, I might take a pic.
Can you do it with coriander?
Look, coriander, you probably, if you're buying your bunch of coriander, the question is, can you grow coriander from your bunches? If you've got the roots attached, by all means shove it in. It's probably easier with coriander to actually plant the seeds that you buy as your spice. You can actually grow those. So that is easier because it's such a quick growing herb. Give it a go, and you probably get some, depending on the length of the stem on it. If you've got the root ball at the bottom, absolutely shove it in some water and you'll find that will grow, and you can pot that up and it'll keep going, or just keep it in the water. If you're going to just keep it in a glass of water, add a couple of little drops of sea salt or something like that. If you overdo that, your kitchen will smell like fish. So just gentle with it, and remember that this is a closed container. So if you're putting a cap full of fish emulsion in 9 litres, this isn't a lot. So only like a tiny drop, a couple of drops would be fine, and that will just keep it going and it'll flourish. Same thing with this sweet potato. I've popped a little bit of the water out of aquaponics in it to just give it a lift. But yeah, much easier to grow things like mustard. Coriander you can grow from the seeds. Most spices you can. I even grew chickpeas from the dried chickpeas out of the container. We gave it a bit of a go, and they potted up. They're really cute. Give it a go. They're great in spring as a ground cover green manure crop, and they give you something to eat. I love making hummus. So it may take a while. We were having that joke, you know, if you want to grow your own lentils or you want to grow your own chickpeas, it might take you quite a lot of them. But yeah, definitely worth giving it a go. So cutting, we'll go back to cuttings. With these cuttings, when I have, when I've cut my branch off or stolen my little bit from the side of somebody's wall as I'm going for my exercise, you'll find that it occasionally has these. You can just use the cut end. So I'll get my secateurs. I have a piece of binder twine on the end of them because I have a bit of a tendency to actually stick them down in the garden and lose them. So usually I have multiple pairs of secateurs, but generally secateurs come in really camouflaged colours like brown or green or yellow, and they just blend. So this blends with mulch and pea hay, and it's never good. Anyway, that's why I have bits of binder twine on it. So when you want to do it, take your cutting, give it a good, you've got your nice cut. You can use that's fine. Your cutting works fine. What I do prefer though is tearing these down. So when you tear down the little branches, you get what we call a foot or a heel cutting. So with these, like I did these ones here, if you have a look, it looks like a little foot. This one here has got a lot more surface area, and I find that I get better roots off this. So generally, if I can, I will always take heel cuttings. So with this one branch here, I could have just stuck that in, and I still can. I can cut it up into extra bits, or what I can do is I can tear these little ones down here, and I can make, out of that one little branch, I've got 2, 4, 6. I would probably cut this up here, leave a few. So when we're doing cuttings, strip off the lower ones. Things like rosemary are great. Dry that, don't waste it. Dry them off. Strip the leaves off, and what it does is it helps the cutting. It doesn't have to push so much energy into all of those leaves. So strip them all down. Right. Just leave the ones at the top. If you're doing a cutting with something that has really large leaves, I would cut the leaves in, take off the really large ones, or even cut them in half. This sweet potato here, I would take that leaf off there, take that one off, and just leave the smaller leaves, because then it doesn't have to work quite as hard. So I've got these cuttings. You can just stick them like that in the water, and then they'll sprout roots. The other way to do it is to pot them up. Now, when I'm potting up, you can just shove them in as they are. I've made up some potting mix. On the bottom of your notes, I've put some of the recipes for the Gardening Australia one. Milkwood Permaculture have a really great potting mix. You can buy potting mixes, but you can make your own. I prefer to make my own. And don't get hung up too much on the recipe of making it. Just it needs to be friable, it needs to hold some moisture, and it needs to have a bit of organic matter in it. Don't put added fertilizers or anything like that, depending on what you're putting in it. But for things like herbs and things like that, basic potting mix is great. I've just got a mix of compost, worm castings, and my coir peat, because I like the coir because it holds a bit more moisture for me. So with these, you can buy rooting hormones. I generally don't. You can either use a little bit of powdered cinnamon. That works really well. So I just have one that I use in the garden in a little jar, and then I just dip the ends of mine in, and then I pop them in my potting mix. You can use a bit of raw honey if you can get hold of that. I know that's a little bit more expensive, which is why cinnamon's really good, because it's really cheap. Just get the stuff that you buy in the supermarket, and that works fine. The other one is to make your own willow water. The rooting hormones that you buy in the shops, they have they're basically the same compounds as what we call willow water. So all you need to do for that is actually take a cutting off a weeping willow or your twisted willow, your bat willow, any of those, and pop them in some water. So when you've got your cuttings, stick them in the same water, and the compound comes out of that, and it actually speeds up the process. So it's a really cheap way. Don't buy it anymore. Just willow water or cinnamon works perfectly fine. With these, and with any cuttings, you can individually put them into your pot. What I find is with these little ones, they move around a little bit too much, and you can break off the little tiny hair roots. So what I generally do, and to save a bit of space and potting mix, bunch them all together. You can tie them up with a little bit of string if you want to. Generally give them a tie up. Let me find a bit of string. I probably wouldn't use a rubber band, because you need to be able to separate them without breaking off any of the little roots. So tie them up so that they stay fairly still. Get yourself a bit of a stick, and you can make yourself a hole and poke them in there. So I can put a few bunches in there, and they will just hold each other up. So you can, when you take a cutting, you can actually bunch up a heap in there and just pretty much fill that whole pot with it. What you will find is with your semi-hardwood cuttings that you're taking sort of this time of year, sort of late summer, autumn is the best time to take those cuttings. When you put them in there, it's going to take probably 3 to 4 weeks before they'll start getting roots on them. It doesn't take as long if you've already started them in the water. But the easiest way to find out whether or not you have got some roots after that time, so generally I would pot them all together and put them aside. Just make sure you've got them watered, or the sprinkler, or you can pop them under a little tree that gets watered and forget about them for a while. Once you want to check whether or not they've actually got any roots, you will find if you give it a little jiggle and a little tiny tug, if there's some resistance to that tug, you've got some roots. If it really super easily pulls out, you can generally tell that the leaves at the top have died off and it looks a bit like a stick. That generally tells you that hasn't taken. But sometimes some plants take a little bit longer, so don't be too hasty in chucking out things. If it's still green on top, give it a little bit more time and it'll get going. But they're really, really easy. So, your geraniums, I love centre geraniums, so this is a really easy way to start off your centre geraniums, and any of the cuttings that you take from your friend's place. So cuttings are really easy. With your cuttings, the other one that we generally take when we're doing our gardening is what we call hardwood cutting, and they're generally what we take in winter when it's dormant. So I will take hardwood cuttings of my fruit trees. Figs are really easy, so if you find someone who's got a really yummy variety of fig, you can take a cutting of that. Mulberries are another one, so if you find somebody with a really yummy mulberry, they're really easy ones to take. Now, the other ones are, things like in your garden, if you've got buddleias or anything that goes dormant. So what I usually do, so these are some pieces of my mulberry tree. If your mulberry has leaves on it still, so I've stripped the leaves off pretending that this is dormant. If you've still got leaves on yours and you want to do some pruning, now's the time to prune. So what you will find is if you prune summer when it's still got some leaves on it, it won't go quite as wild as it will do is if you prune it in winter. So summer pruning is for control and shaping and getting rid of any crisscrossy bits or, getting it to the height that we want. Winter pruning is to reinvigorate plants. So don't prune any of your fruit trees in the winter unless you want them to go nuts and give you a little bit of fruit. So it's also it's taming, especially if you've got a mulberry. Taming at this time of year rather than winter is the best time to do it. But you can still take the cuttings now. With these, when I do cuttings, you can take little ones. I know they sort of suggest 15 to 20 centimetres. Quite honestly, I'm a little bit impatient when it comes to things like that. And I don't really want to take a little cutting this big. If I can take a cutting this big, and then I can have an instant kind of plant. I know I've got a big buddleia hedge in the veggie patch. I started everything from little cuttings that I got given from a friend, and they were all very small. But now, literally, I'll take a cutting my height, up to about I wouldn't probably go any thicker than a thumb. Like I will with my figs, but with the buddleia, you haven't got anything to lose by taking a cutting. So, take a big piece. Don't be stingy about it. I'm not into stingy gardening. Anyway, back to cuttings. With these ones, when they're dormant, I find, as I said, you've got a small surface area with your cut end. What I generally do is get your secateurs, get your knife, that sort of thing. With the bottom part of my cutting here, what I will generally do is I will take a section off it. Don't get too worried about it, just bark it. Okay, take a bit off like that. And then what I will do is I will dust that and get a little bit of cinnamon. So I will generally do that. I will cut the end again so that it's open, and I will rub it with my cinnamon. Just cover it. If you've got it in your jar, just roll it around a bit. Cover that section in cinnamon, cover the end in cinnamon as well. Now, with the dormant cuttings, you will find they will take a lot longer. So when you're taking them in winter, you will find that you need to just pretend that they're not there anymore. Leave them in their pot, do them the same way as this. I would cluster them all together. So even these, I would probably put, 10 of these in a pot together, bound up, shove them in together, do exactly the same thing here, and then leave them alone and wait. So mid-spring, you will find they will start to shoot. These little buds will shoot. And then leave it for a little bit longer. You have to be patient with these. Once they've got a really good root system on them, then I would gently take them out of the pot and I would separate them out. So you've got a bunch of these. Don't be too hasty to just rip them open. What I would do is I would get yourself a bucket of water. Grab yourself a bucket of water. This goes for seedlings and things as well. If you're separating things, don't be tempted to push it out of the seed tray and rip the end off. I know lots of people do that. Don't do that. That's the growing end, okay? So it's bound up there. It's all wound up. These are all clogged in together in a pot. Put them in some water. Give them a gentle swish around. Look, you can do it with a bit of sea salt in it so that it sort of reduces the shock. That's fine. And gently prise them apart. So when you're doing it, gently prise them apart so that you don't rip up the roots. You've spent the last, couple of months getting them to root. Don't rip all the roots off, okay? So gently prise them apart, and then you can individually pot them up with that. Now, they're basically the easiest way to do it. You can do it with your fruit trees. You can even try it with your citrus if you really want to. The reason that we buy most fruit trees grafted is because the root system is going to be better suited to your climate and your soil type and things like that. So here we generally buy a grafted fruit tree. But there are some things like, your mulberry and things like that you can grow perfectly fine from a cutting. And these grow really quickly. So, you don't have to wait all that long. I would find they're not going to fruit generally off this first year, but the second year you'll definitely get fruit off them. Figs really depend on the size of the cutting and the type of fig that you're taking the cutting from. Panache figs, I haven't had, they're the green and sort of green and yellow striped one. I haven't had much luck with them. I find them really slow growing where I am, but it might be my climate, might be where I've got it. Whereas my brown turkey fig kind of just takes over the entire world in the veggie patch. Same with my genoa, my white genoa and things like that. So figs are definitely worth giving a go with those sorts of things. But you can also take ornamental cuttings like that as well. You can take your ornamental cuttings, and natives as well. So eugavillias and restringias and things like that, they all do perfectly fine from a cutting as well. Are there any questions? Normally I'd be peppered with questions and I'd get totally off topic and then have to be reined back in, but that's all right. Now, so I wanted to talk about the cutting. So they're basically the main two types that we would take now. So that's the semi-hardwood and the hardwood. The other ones that we do take are root cuttings. So generally with a root cutting, the ones that we have sort of edible wise are horseradish. I think that probably there's a bit of a resurgence with horseradish at the moment, with people making fire cider and that sort of thing. And if you haven't had a look at fire cider, check it out. It's a really good tonic to have, really easy. You make it with garlic and chili and horseradish and ginger, and you put it with some apple cider vinegar and let it put a dish underneath, let it ferment and do some crazy stuff, and then if you're brave, take a shot glass full, and it keeps colds and flus and things away. But yeah, fire cider is pretty cool. Now, with your root cuttings, the main ones that I take root cuttings with in my garden are horseradish and comfrey. So with that, generally when I want to do it, I'm just going to empty this out down below, and I've got another little pot down the bottom, so I'm giving it a bit of a shake. So I love horseradish. It's pretty full on flavour, great with it's traditional, goes with meat and all that sort of thing. But what I do find is as a companion plant, if you are growing in your food forest or in your orchard or things like that, I do a heap of, I love the idea of a food forest and layering and making sure that you're creating a guild or creating a group of plants that are symbiotic, they're helping each other. And one of the really interesting ones that I found, and I only saw it written down somewhere once in some really obscure book, and I can't even remember where it was that horseradish and mulberries are a good companion. I'm talking and gesticulating, nobody can hear me.
Yep.
Aha. Okay. How come my volume's gone?
I don't know.
Don't you?
Keep talking.
Keep talking. Okay, I'll keep talking. So
Yeah.
with it, it's grown in a direct line, and I have got this incredible horseradish patch, and the mulberry has gone absolutely nuts. So in my case, they definitely get along. They get along really well.
Yep.
But
Yep. It's okay.
we're back.
Come back. Yep.
Awesome. So with the horseradish, root cuttings. Now, this is one of the ones that I would say plant in the ground, go crazy. Horseradish goes absolutely wild. It's a little bit like mint. It will take over the universe. If you're okay with that, cool. If you're not, grow it in a pot. Really important. Because we can take root cuttings from this, anywhere that you damage this plant, so I'm going to hit this one in the water as well. Anywhere where you damage this root, so when you're digging it up, be very careful, because if you cut one of these roots off in our horseradish, it will grow, which is awesome if you want to divide your plants up. Not so cool if you're trying to dig it up and get rid of it. Okay, so with this, you can take a root cutting. So when we dig up our, we generally do this when they're dormant. I wouldn't be doing this ordinarily when I've got lots of green growth. Generally, root cuttings we take when they're dormant. So in the winter, when you've got your comfrey, label things. All right, I've got a big thing about labeling. Know where your plants are, okay? Especially if they go dormant. So with your comfrey, I use an old wooden spoon. You can write on that, any kind of tag. Just know where it is. Dig it up, and you can take a segment off. So use your secateurs and cut off a little segment of your root. That will grow another plant. So they're really easy. All right, so that's root cuttings pretty much. I'm going to not cut this one up too much. Well, I can do, but just get your secateurs, and I'm going to repot this one up. So this is a really easy division as well, but I would pot it up and feed it on. You're not probably going to get the big root that looks like a carrot, or like a new carrot that they get in England. Pardon?
Like a parsnip.
Yeah, like a parsnip. Dave's suggesting like a parsnip. You're not going to get that size here, I'm finding. I'm still finding that I get a good sort of pencil size thickness, but after a few years, it'll be interesting to see what I dig up around my mulberry tree and see whether, because of that beneficial relationship, whether I get bigger growth. But yeah, I think it really depends. Some plants grow really, really well in different situations, but yeah, so root cuttings are another really easy one to take.
Had a question about the white shitoot.
Yes.
Do you only do air cuttings, or can you do like a hardwood cutting as well?
I haven't tried. I haven't tried doing an air cutting with that, or even taking a cutting off it. I've got one that's quite young. If you're pruning it, it'd be worth just taking a cutting and giving it a go. I know generally they say white mulberries are harder to take cuttings from. I haven't found that's the case either, so I think it really just depends. Do it on a good day. Don't, if you follow moon planting and things like that, do it on a fertile day and take your cutting. But it'd be worth layering. They are quite difficult with the white shitoot. They're not a really common one. White shitoot, red shitoot, they're quite difficult to get. There are a few places locally that have them, or you might be able to find somebody who's got one growing. But yeah, I haven't tried that one, but if you find out or you give it a go and it works, let me know.
Jackie's got one.
Yeah, Jackie's got one, has she? Yeah. I've got a white shitoot. I was so excited. I bought it for Charlotte. She loves mulberries, and then it fruited, and she goes, "Oh, she said, Mummy, they look like caterpillars." So she wasn't really excited. They're so sweet. They're crazy sweet. But yeah, it wasn't quite the excitement that I wanted. She thought they looked like okay. But anyway, so I would give it a go. Look, if you're cutting it and you're trimming it back, you really haven't got anything to lose by giving it a go. So cuttings, that's pretty much for cuttings. What I did want to run through was some tubers. So with the tubers, generally the root tubers are the ones that we You know, so if you think root tubers, you're thinking, I might leave my... I've got a thing with gloves. Everybody who knows me knows that I garden with gloves because I got bitten by a redback spider, so I'm a bit of a wear gloves, use your PPE. Also, it helps to, you know, stop you from cutting your fingers and things like that. So when you've got a root tuber, generally with your things like sweet potato or potato, you know, if you're going to grow a potato, wait until it chits, get some little eyes, or you can chit it yourself. I know that sounds a bit rude, but that's when you're actually just getting the little the eyes. So if I'm chitting potatoes, what I do is I put them in an egg container. I put my little seed potatoes in the little egg container, in the egg carton, and I just leave them where they've got quite a bit of light, and then they'll shoot. Plant them with the little eyes up, and then you're good to go. And that's just basically root tubers. With a sweet potato, it's a little bit different because while I'm growing this one in the water, what I'm actually wanting is the slips. So these are technically a cutting, but you can grow it from a sweet potato like that. But what I find is that you don't get as much. You're going to get lots of growth, which is great because you can actually eat the leaves and things like that. But if you plant from slips, it's more productive. So with this root tuber, I would start it and then I would pull the slips off. The other thing is, once this is growing, so once the slip grows, you'll find that it produces your tubers under the ground. So to get the most out of that, you need to trim the ends off your sweet potato. It runs like a vine. So it's a great weed suppressor, really good living mulch, basically. You know, we buy in so much mulch, but really if we think about what plants we can grow that will smother the ground and do the same thing, we're actually getting more bang for our buck. We're doing multi-functions, and I think, you know, if we start looking at our permaculture principles and things like that, that's one of those things. You know, we want to stack our functions. So what I've done is I've just trimmed off some of this. I've got some sweet potatoes growing in the ground. They run really long. You really don't want to let them get too long. Each one of these nodes here where the leaves were, they will grow roots, and it will take away from making tubers under the ground. So you can actually grow it upwards. So if you wanted to put your slip in, you can grow them up and fan them out, or, you know, grow them up a post, or do whatever you like, and just pick your leaves or your greens. Or as they get, you know, over a half a metre long, give them a snip, you know, and contain them a little bit more, and then use it as a cutting or a slip and plant these. So these ones here, I took off the end of my my sweet potato, and literally, I think it was like, what has it been, 4 days now? I'll just trim off a couple of these leaves. 4 days and I've got roots. So I didn't do anything with it technical. I just chopped the ends off, took off these leaves here, and I put them in a bucket of water in the veggie patch. So they haven't had any love. They've just been in there, and they've got their roots. So with those, I would do it exactly the same way. I'd get my pot. With me, I'm going to pot these up and overwinter them where they can't get frosted. But if you're not you're in a frost-free zone, don't worry about it. Just chuck them in the ground or in a pot. So get yourself a stick, pencil, whatever you like. You can use your finger, gloved. Make a hole. Because I've got little roots on this, I don't want to damage the roots, so that's why I make the hole. So give it a bit of a wriggle so that I've got a decent size. I don't know if that'll hold. See, I've got a decent size hole. You want it to be about the thickness, a little bit thicker space. Then what I do is I gently pop that in so I don't damage any of the roots, and give it a bit of a firm down around my pot. And then I would fill the pot. So go around there, grab another one, and do exactly the same thing. So pop that in and keep it going.
What plant was it that you're just showing?
So
this is the sweet potato.
So these are sweet potato slips.
Okay.
Right. So this thing here, once it gets going, these little bits that I've torn off, these ones here are a bit thicker. They look different because I've cut this off the growing vine that's in the ground. So they're going to be a bit thicker. But absolutely use the greens for your sweet potatoes. I've just found out you can eat the leaves off your pumpkins. I haven't tried it, but I think we need to rethink what we eat and how much we're wasting on what we can actually eat. So it's one of those things. We're a little bit wasteful. We need to be a bit more adventurous. So sweet potatoes, they eat them all over the world. You can actually just chuck them in your smoothies, apparently. So you can steam them, use them like spinach, chuck them in your smoothie. So they're tubers. The other ones that we do have are, move some things out of the way. This is I love this plant. This is a great plant. So this is Canna Edulis, or Queensland arrowroot. What I've done is I've just pulled up a clump. These grow, they're an edible canna, and they just grow as a clump. They really don't take over, which is really nice. So you can have them in the garden. They look really ornamental, but they're actually very useful as well. The leaves are great for chicken food. They're high in protein. But what you can actually do is, if you like me and can't grow bananas, I've got far too much wind and it's too cold, and we don't eat bananas, so I figure I'll have some banana alternatives. So if you were going to use the banana leaf to steam, then you can use the arrowroot leaf to do the same thing. So if you're making dumplings, or you want to wrap your fish in it, or chicken or whatever, you can do the same thing with the arrowroot leaf. So these ones here, these are what we call rhizomes. So when we're going to divide them up, I just put the spade in underneath one of these, and you can divide them up. They're pretty easy. So ginger's the same. Ginger and turmeric are rhizomes as well. I'll give it a dunk. Makes it easier in the water. And I have a dog sitting underneath the table, so my dog is probably going to come flying out if I happen to cover him in water as well. So there is our semi-dunked rhizome. I think they're gorgeous. I love this purple colour. It's amazing. So the reason that I like these is that you only need a small amount, and then they multiply and you've got food. So with this here, this part down the bottom here is actually what we eat. We eat the rhizome, and you can eat it like a potato. So anything you would normally put a potato in, then you can just try and find a nice big fat one. They say anywhere between sort of golf ball, tennis ball size, eat those. Is this one got a bigger one? So you've got this lovely tuber. It's nice and white inside, so pick the nice fresh ones. This one's a little bit older, so I probably wouldn't use this one. I would actually plant this one. But what you can find is that they are beautiful inside, beautiful and white inside, just like a potato. So use it as a starch. It's gluten-free. I use it as a thickener, so I actually make flour out of it. I use it as a thickener when I make my relishes, because normally if you put plain flour in it, it kind of makes it go a little bit almost a brown colour when you do your tomato relish and things like that. Or I find the same thing when I'm doing a stew. It'll sort of go a little bit brown, whereas when I put arrowroot in, it keeps that beautiful vibrant red. So if you're make taco relish or any of those sorts of things, and I find it's really nice. But it is a good way to thicken things instead of using corn flour or plain flour, things like that. So arrowroot, these are wonderful. You can just plant those. So what I would do is, you're going to find that you have a clump. So with your rhizomes, you need to gently prise them apart. You can use your hands. See that they're really not that difficult to pull apart. And then this one clump here, I can actually make quite a lot. So I'll find there's one there, and then this one here will do, that one will go as well, and I've got some roots on here. So what you can do is use your secateurs or a knife, and then from one plant. So it's really easy. It's not terribly technical. Anyone can do it, okay? Just when you're going to plant it, have a look at where you need to plant this one. So this one here, you'll notice that is where the top, that's this section here. So we want to plant that up. All right, same thing with this. Now, as I said with the other things, when we're planting them, these leaves are going to take quite a lot of energy, so I would chop them down. So I would chop that one off. This one's not too bad. If that was a big leaf, you know, you can actually cut that leaf down to make it a little bit easier, and then you've got yourself a cutting there. So it's like when you're doing iris and daylilies and things like that, you know, chop a section of that off. So, and it makes it a lot easier. But arrowroot, fabulous plant. The chickens and the ducks really like eating that, so it's a great food, you know, rather than having to buy food for anybody. But it's a lovely, you know, for us as well. Great plant. So most rhizomes, pretty easy. Now the other one I wanted to go through was stolons. You have stolen some plants, I'm sure. Strawberry runners. This time of year, you'll find that the strawberry plant is it's got a little stem coming down, and then there's these little tiny plants that kind of look like air plants growing off it. Cut that, and then you can plant those individual little strawberries. I've already put mine in the ground. But they're a great way to make new plants off a strawberry plant. The other one is mint, is a great example of that. So when we're talking about stolons, we're talking about the underground stem and it growing off that. So this is one stem here. So I can actually cut this section off here, and this will grow another plant. But that's just you can layer it with the underground stem. That's the other way of doing it, is layering. You know, you can lay it down. You can peg it down with any large sweet potatoes. Do it really easy. But you know, lay it down on the ground, cover it with a little bit of dirt. You can peg it down, put a brick over it, put a bit of wire over it. Really easy way to get your plant. And then once it's started growing, you can sever that tie with the parent plant, and then you've got yourself another cutting. So it's a really easy way. The other one is clump division. So this time, you know, you'll find that you'll go through a stage where your plants look really healthy, and then every now and again they get a bit, they don't flower quite as much, or they're looking a little bit lackluster. They get a bit crowded. So this is some garlic chives. They're a fabulous plant. They grow. So normal chives will actually die down during the winter, whereas the garlic chives don't. And so you've got this time of the year we're planting our garlic, so we lose that kind of garlic flavour in our cooking and things like that. So this can be a really good substitute for that. You can, at the moment, mine's seeding, so you can grow them from the seed, really easy. These are prolific seeders. Everything about this plant is edible, so you can eat the flowers and this as well as the leaves here. So I've got quite a few, and you'll notice that there's these lovely little black seeds inside. So once the flower spike comes up, you get a lovely white flower. When that finishes, you'll get these little green bobbles, and then when they're dry and they're ready to go, they dry out. They go sort of that white, creamy colour, and then you've got little black seeds. Don't have to get too technical. All I do is generally cut one of those heads off, upend it in a pot. Really technical way to take a blue one, upend it in the pot, cover it with some potting mix, and I generally, this is my cheaty way to know who it is if you haven't got a label, is leave some of the stalk poking out, and I'll go, garlic chives. So that's the way I do it. Pretty easy. Clump division, every now and again you're going to have to divide your clumps. If you're doing agapanthus, get yourself a decent shovel. I've broken, I don't know how many shovels, trying to dig up clumps of those. But it is a really good thing to do with your daylilies and garlic chives and things like that. So these are really easy. Chop the top off. If you've got some flowering stems or anything like that, take all of that kind of stuff off. What you can do is, these are going to be really easy, and I will just dug them up, give them a bit of a shake, give them a bit of a pat, and you'll see all of the soil come off. Now you can get in there with, depending on how thick your clump is, you can get in there with a hand saw, you can get in there with your reciprocal saw, which is my favourite little thing, or in my tool, my girl's tool. For pruning, you can use that, you can use a knife, you can use a secateurs, you can use a spade. So you can see that I've sliced through my clump with my spade, and I've got a flat edge where I've cut off some of these. So, are we going okay, or we lost it?
No, we're fine.
No? Okay.
Jane's watching. Jane's good place.
Hello, Jane. Jane has the most gorgeous garden. I love gardeners. They're really friendly bunch, share lots of things. And one of the nice parts about gardening is when I get something from someone and I put it in my garden, then I've got a connection to that person. So I'll have, I'll be able to go past and go, oh, Marion gave me some of that, or Jane gave me some of that, or Lisa gave me some of that, or, it's nice. It's a nice way to connect. I think gardeners are a really connected group. Okay, so dividing your clump up, you can give it a bit of a go. These are pretty easy with my hands. Some aren't, and you're gonna have to use a tool. So this sort of clump, I would divide up into probably, I don't know, at least 3. I don't like dividing them up. If you really wanted to, each one of these comes out and it's like that, and that's a blend. I kind of feel that they're a little lonely. If this was lemongrass, if you buy lemongrass from the shop and it's got the end on it, you can grow that in some water. Now, if you're dividing lemongrass at home, don't divide it up into single ones. It will sulk its head off and most likely die. They don't like it. Don't be too hasty. Leave it in a good sized clump. So I like to use a sort of a fist clump on a lot of things. Otherwise it just feels a bit lonely. You can, but they take a little bit more looking after, I guess. Whereas this, garlic chives are pretty hard to kill. So I would, with this one here, I'd give it a root prune as well. Once you've, hello, I've got a little millipede in there. Okay, give it a root prune. You have given it a haircut, so give it a root prune too, top and tail. I'm just going to cut these. These are old flower stems, so we don't need those. They're just going to take, you'll find that they'll die off anyway, but you don't want to have to push any energy up through those. And then you've got yourself a clump. I've got a few here that they got spaded. So they got chopped off as I was doing the spade. They'll be fine and they will regrow as well. So it's a pretty gnarly looking thing. You don't have to be too worried about it. Now, with that, grab yourself your potting mix. As I said, make your own. It's much easier. Don't get too worried about it. If you can't get to the shops, you don't have access to potting mix, but you've got some good dirt in your backyard somewhere, stick this back in the ground. Stick it where you want to grow it. These make the best borders. I love them because they've got an umbel flower and they bring in a lot of beneficial insects and things like that, and they're a usable plant, so multifunction. You can pot them up or you can stick them in the ground. If you're going to pot them up, we want to put the soil back to that level that it was before. So I put it in there and I grabbed myself my potting mix that I have prepared earlier, and I will just fill that pot back up to that level that I want. Give it a bit of a settle so that we get any air out, any pockets, things like that, and pretty easy. Label it. Okay, if you know what it is, that's fine. You can tell what garlic chives are, but if it's something, if it's a daylily or it's something that's got a particular colour flower, or it looks like other things, or if you're making stick cuttings, label them so you know what they are. So that if you happen to go, oh, I've got some cuttings of this, and share with somebody, they don't go, hang on, I thought you gave me the pink one, but you gave me the yellow one, so label things. That's the best way to do it. If I've got any other questions about cuttings and clump divisions and things like that,
just finish up.
Pardon?
Just say you're going to answer some questions. It takes a little while for it to come through.
Does it? Okay. So, I think that's probably a really good, quick wrap up of cuttings and things like that. If you want to flick through any questions, Dave can see them as they scroll up on there. But other than that, I think really it's a matter of having a look at what you've got in the garden. I'm pretty sure everybody, will still share with each other with our cuttings, but don't be afraid to use your scraps. Think about them a little bit differently, and then with your plants, it's a really easy way to multiply them. So take some cuttings, and do your semi-hardwood cuttings, do your hardwood cuttings. Don't be afraid to try some root cuttings. As I said, I love mint and it grows wide. I love just letting it grow, and the same with the comfrey. But there are some things that get a little bit out of control in a small garden. Stick them in a pot. But don't be afraid to put everything in pots too. You don't have to have a big garden. You can grow, in a small space. Rethink your containers. Styrofoam are great. If you want to grow any of your quick things, grow your pak choy and all of that sort of stuff, your spring onions, stick them in styrofoam containers. You can reuse your milk containers, all that sort of thing. So,
all right, you got a question. Would you recommend seeds or cuttings for passion fruit?
Seeds or cuttings for passion fruit? Oh, look, to be honest, I would buy the bullet and go buy a plant. You can grow them from seed. I haven't tried. I really haven't had much luck with passion fruits. So if there's one that you really like, give it a go as a cutting. Find somebody with one as a cutting. The thing with cuttings, need to be really careful, especially with things like a passion fruit, is a lot of them are trademarked. So with them, don't buy a grafted one. You will generally, I bought a grafted one here and I put it in, and the graft grew big and wild and takes over the planet, and it's still here, and I never got any fruit off of the other one. So buy a really good one. So Sunshine, Panama Gold, Panama Red for our climate, those ones are really good. I would go with, they're not long lived, so 7 years is about what you generally get out of one. And they can be a bit finicky. So, if someone has got a really nice one, give it a go. If they're trimming it back.
What's the best non-invasive passion fruit?
Oh, look. I have had trouble with Nellie Kelly's. So I would go with something other than that. But that's, my... look, I think... generally, it's the rootstock that takes over, not the actual passion fruit. Remember that you need to prune it and you need to train it. So the issues that you have with them are overfeeding them with nitrogen, and then you don't get any fruit. And then you also get a bit of mildew and things like that if they don't have enough airflow. So you do have to prune them. And then if you're growing them along a espalier, so generally people grow them on a fence or things like that, fertilise the length of your trellis, not just in that section, because it actually sends roots all the way along. So a little bit and put it down that way. So I would go that way. But I haven't had, other than the rootstock taking over, I haven't had any issue with the actual passion fruit taking over the planet. Generally, it's what we want, because you actually want it to cover something and give you fruit and things like that. So other than that, yeah.
No other questions.
Perfect.
Look,
thanks very much for coming to my first online live workshop. And thank you very much to the Shire of Dardanup for running them, and for Isabel for walking me through the process, and for my husband Dave being the cameraman today. Thanks very much for everybody's questions. I'm sure you can put a few more through on the feed. Please give feedback. I love feedback. It helps me get better as a presenter, a facilitator, and it also gives Isabel some ideas as well. So thanks very much for coming and being part of my veggie patch today and my sustainable living workshop. So it was awesome. Thanks very much.